Hey folks, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and I am doing yet another installment of the weekly Q&A. This is going to be one of the last ones from our location here in Quincy, Massachusetts. So not sure if I'll do one next week or not, but if I don't, anyway, your last chance to see this sort of like interesting setup with the view of the Echo back there and the TV, I think. Anyway, this week I am answering the question, should you have references as a freelancer the same way you would with job hunting? So I can remember more than usual of the context in which this came up. And it was basically the idea of somebody was, I think, maybe a little caught off guard by the idea of being asked for references as a freelancer and flummoxed and like, oh man, this is something that I should have thought of, right? Like, I'm supposed to have references. Why didn't I know that? So let's dive into that. Is that a thing for freelancers? Should it be a thing? Should you do it? I'll kind of get into all of that today. But first, in case you're not in the US, I don't know to what extent this might be a US specific thing, but just to define what I'm talking about here and what we mean. In the world of salaried employment, it's pretty common practice for somebody that's going to hire you to ask for what's called references. This is a list of people. Usually they probably want 3 of them, 3 people that the prospective employer can call and verify stuff about you. So usually your references are going to be former coworkers or bosses, ideally. That's a good reference to have, although kind of tough to do if you're looking for work at your current job behind your boss's back. But people that have managed you in the past make good references. Coworkers can make good references. Maybe to some extent people that reported to you, if that's relevant. Anyway, it is generally supposed to be people with whom you have worked in the past that will more or less vouch for you. So if I were thinking about hiring you and I were going to enlist this practice that I personally don't think much of, what I would do is I would go and ask for these people. You would give me a phone number and say, this is, Susie, and I used to report to Susie. I would call Susie and I would say, hey, so is this person, a thief? I mean, probably not, but like basically, so there's actual like kind of strictures on, I think, what you're supposed to ask from an HR perspective, lest you get yourself into trouble. And there's also restrictions on what you're supposed to say, especially if you work for a company that the person used to work for. So it's kind of an artificial and weird game. But you might ask questions. Common ones are, if you're serving as a reference, that they'll ask you, would you hire this person again? Is this person good to work with? Maybe things like, what would you consider this person's strengths to be? That type of stuff. So that's the idea of a reference. It is sort of a character witness for you, a person that will vouch for you. And there's a certain like incumbency to this, at least in the US, as a way to verify things in the context of salaried hiring. It is pretty common for employers to do these reference checks or reference verifications. And you as an employee are well served, if you're going to be applying for jobs, to in advance line up references ahead of time and get their buy-in, because you're going to give their contact information. You'll probably ask the people serving as references how they would prefer to be contacted, and you would notify them when they're going to be contacted. And then probably after the fact, if you're conscientious about such things, if you get that job and you sign on, you would write them a note thanking them and saying, hey, I did get this offer and I accepted, and thank you very much. So that is references in the salaried employed world, at least as it was 8 years ago or 9 years. I don't remember how long it's been since I was somebody that was asking for references. I've served as a reference a bunch of times in the meantime, so I'm assuming this is still a thing. But bear in mind, this is all my memory of the salaried world as it existed maybe 7 or 8 years ago. Since then, I've been a pretty oblique participant, just occasionally offering a reference to somebody that works for Hit Subscribe or something in some capacity. So caveat emptor, but that is my understanding of references. Now, the real question is, does this make sense for you to have as a freelancer? The short version of this is, I guess, if there's a gig that you want and they're asking for it, then okay, you should probably try to rustle up a few references. In general, I think this is not something I would do as a freelancer. It's sort of a weird look. It's kind of a bad look, in my opinion. And I'll get into the specifics of that. But the idea is, I think it's sort of less common of a thing for you to be asked as a freelancer. It's something that if you're relying on it is a little bit amateur hour. And it's a stand-in for another thing that you should be doing, which is having testimonials and more like visible social proof and marketing and such. So let's get into all of that. But the gist is generally, if you're pressed, I guess, supply it. Ideally, there are 3 people in the world that would say nice things about you, but you should take a hard look at why it is you're being asked about this. And if you're being asked about this, it indicates that, number one, the client views you as kind of a pseudo employee. And number 2, they're pretty nervous about doing anything with you. So they're asking for one of the most easily gamed imaginable ways to verify stuff, which is, I mean, like, you could just give them your parents as a reference and say that they were coworkers or something. I don't know. It's not exactly the most bulletproof system of validating anything about anyone. So if somebody's asking you about this, they're really grasping at straws. It just doesn't feel like a productive relationship. It's sort of a paternalistic thing for somebody to ask you. So I would, I guess, approach this by saying, if that is being asked of you in the short term, provide it, but then take a hard look and ask, like, how can I make it so that I'm never asked for this or providing this again? And then, just kind of saying no. I actually personally, I can recall once or twice being asked ahead of some kind of consulting gig for references. And both times that I can think of that this happened, I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I got the business anyway, because what I said is, and if memory serves, at the time I was quite busy and booked, but somebody was engaging me to do some kind of consultative look at what they were doing. And they were like, by the way, can I have some references? And my answer wasn't just no, it was, I would need to think through who I wanted to ask this favor of, and then ask them the favor and coordinate all this. And to be honest, sir, I'm pretty busy. I don't know if I want to spend my time doing that and call in favors. So I get it if that's going to be a deal breaker, and that's okay. And the response to that was, yeah, fair enough, never mind. And then we had a good engagement and things went well. So you could perform a bit of jujitsu on the request if you wanted. It's going to depend on how desperate you are for business and how confidently you can pull that off. You don't want to seem like you're posturing or anything. I was not kidding. I was very much busy. I kind of remember having a conversation of this nature while traveling for like a 100% travel kind of gig. So it's not like I was made of time. But, depending on your situation, you could agree to it in the short term and then think about how to get away from that in the long term, which begs the question, how do you get away from that in the long term? This has to do with marketing and differentiating yourself. So when somebody asks you for a reference, they're kind of saying, I don't trust you, but they're also taking pity on you to some degree, or maybe that's the wrong way of putting it, but they're extending this sort of weird olive branch where it's like, just have your dad tell me you're a good person and we'll do it. Like, I just need something to suggest that I did any of the barest form of diligence imaginable, more than the none I've done so far. So it's a pretty like flimsy request. I'm sure a lot of people who'd ask for it don't think of it that way. I don't know. It's just, it's kind of, it's so unverifiable. It's so flimsy that it seems like a silly thing. It feels like maybe a box that somebody is checking, or maybe they're a little bit naive and thinking that this is a good way to like validate that you're going to do good work for them. But whatever it is, they're looking for a way to trust you, which means they don't trust you. You're an unknown commodity of some kind. What they really want is an indicator of some kind that their money will not be ill spent in working with you. Meaning people, when they're making purchases, they want to see evidence that other people have gone the route they're about to go and not regretted it. There is safety in numbers, so to speak. So, and most of us purchase this way in purchasing psychology. It's why you'll see all kinds of stuff on like squeeze pages and landing pages that's like, join the 300 satisfied customers. You want to feel like other people have made the same decision you're about to make. That's the reinforcement they're looking for. If you lack a website, or you lack an offering page, or you lack the kind of signals that a buyer might queue on normally, this is a rational thing for them to ask you. On the flip side, if you have put up a website If you have a lot of testimonials up there, like logos of businesses that have worked with you or pictures of people with quotes about how awesome you are, that tends to serve as a stand-in for references. If you have collateral like that, a prospect is significantly less likely to make a request like that. They may, of their own volition, like reach out to the people whose contact information you've listed if that information is available to them. So they may do some vetting of your testimonials and stuff, and that's fine. But they're not going to ask you for references as if they were a prospective employer. So one way to have that is these public testimonials. Either, you can put them up on your website, or if you don't want to do that, you can also work them into your sales collateral. So if you have like a sales deck or a sales pitch or something that you take people through after doing some discovery with them, a good move can be to feature, some slides that have a person you've worked with a quote about you or something. So whether that's public or whether it's something that you present privately, that is a good thing to have. I suppose I could get into how to obtain those things, but that's probably a topic for another day. That's its own topic, is how to document testimonials, record them, and present them. But the gist is, get people to say good things about you preemptively and feature those in your marketing and sales. That's a great way to, avoid this situation. You could also, I think I've talked about this. I'll see if I can find it for YouTube, but you could have a portfolio of work, and then they don't need to ask people. They can, reference your design portfolio or your content portfolio or your programming portfolio. I think of portfolios as kind of an intermediate level freelancer thing to have. I would get away from that too over the long haul, but that's a topic for another day, and I think I did a video on it. But it's certainly better than, having your dad tell them you're awesome. So portfolio testimonials is another good one. And best of all, in my mind, is publicly displayable results. So I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think if you were to go to Hit Subscribe's website, we still have up like graphs that are organic search traffic we've obtained for clients over the course of engagements, dating back 4 or 5 years at this point. So to say like, look, here's an outcome that we delivered for a client, it's publicly verifiable, at least to some degree. The more publicly verifiable that is, the better. So if you are a freelance writer or graphic designer, just be like, hey, here's my work on 800 different websites. Go see for yourself. You don't have to ask anybody. The more you can publicly display results and showcase work, the better. And even better than the sort of portfolio concept is to be able to publicly show the results. So if you're showing a portfolio, you're saying, here is my work. Go see for yourself. If you like it, grade me, and then work with me if you think I'm worth a good grade. The real advanced technique is to say, here are publicly demonstrable ways that I've earned return on investment for clients, and here they are right here. If you do that, nobody will ever ask you for anything. They will just be handing over money, because why wouldn't they? If it's very publicly visible and displayable that you can earn a return on investment for a client, there is no conversation to be had there. It's a no-brainer for them. Now, easier said than done. I'm not saying that this is advanced for no reason. It is pretty hard to do that in the first place, then to find ways to do it publicly, and then to showcase that in a believable way. This is not easy, but it is what I would aim for if I were you. And then finally, what all of this rolls up to, if you're starting to achieve very publicly visible results, you are in real danger of becoming a recognized industry expert or authority. Once that happens, there's no need for anyone to ask for references or really anything. You're just kind of out there and famous for whatever it is that you do. So if you think about, I can think of people off the top like Scott Hanselman and the work he does, in developer evangelism, all the stuff he does for Microsoft. He's a very publicly credible and visible authority. If you think of somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk as a marketer, he's just out there and his face is absolutely everywhere. So you would come to believe that this is a man who can give you some advice about how to, do digital marketing and get the word out. So establishing credible results, and then finally on top of that, building kind of an empire of authority where you are a recognized expert that's being asked to speak on things. Once you do that, people will already feel like they know you and trust you, even if you've never met them. And that is kind of the end game that you should aspire to in a practice or in a niche of any kind. So To kind of summarize, if you are asked for references, I would say that this is a sign that you are doing something wrong with your practice. The first step is just get the barest semblance of, a website, testimonials, something in your marketing and sales that like speaks to that, so you don't have to be caught on your back foot being asked about it. The second step would be to start to iterate from that to more like publicly demonstrable results. So it's not just some person on your website theoretically and supposedly saying that you're awesome. It is some way that you can point and say, like, this is an outcome I delivered for someone. The more ROI minded that outcome, the better. And then finally, using all of that momentum to establish yourself as an industry expert, and you'll never be asked for references or anything like that ever again. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that helps, and I will catch you all next time.